So, um, imagine a 300-year-old immortal killer, right? Just grappling with this intense existential dread, navigating these brutal Darwinian laws of nature and fighting a centuries-long psychic Cold War.
Right.
Now, imagine the architect of that terrifying, blood-soaked universe is a 13-year-old girl sitting in her middle school bedroom.
I mean, it completely shatters the illusion we have of, like, adolescent innocence. We tend to think of 13-year-olds as being totally insulated from the darker, cynical realities of existence.
Yeah, yuck.
Or at least, lacking the vocabulary to articulate that kind of theological terror so sharply.
Which is exactly what makes Amelia Atwater-Rhodes' debut novel In the Forests of the Night such a staggering piece of literature to unpack for our deep dive today. She wrote the core of this text at 13, and she got it published in 1999 when she was 15.
Which is just wild to think about.
It is. And for those of you listening who are familiar with the text, you already know we aren't dealing with the sparkly, romanticized vampires that dominated the young adult genre shortly after this era.
Oh, absolutely not.
There's no forbidden high school cafeteria romance here. The narrative bypasses the romance entirely to focus on a vicious blood feud and the theological dread of damnation.
And the structural sophistication she attempts here is just as jarring as the thematic darkness. I mean, balancing a dual timeline narrative is tough for any writer.
Oh, for sure.
But she's flashing between the modern-day existence of a 300-year-old vampire named Risika and then jumping back to her past life as a 17-year-old Puritan girl named Rachel Weatere in 1701 Massachusetts. It's incredibly difficult to pull off.
Right, because it forces you, the reader, to constantly superimpose the hardened predator over the terrified human girl.
Exactly. It creates this tension that just refuses to romanticize vampirism. It treats it instead as a profound biological and psychological trauma.
I've actually always been fascinated by how the author completely rewrites the biological reality of vampires to support that idea of trauma and adaptation.
Yeah, the world building is so deliberate.
It really is. I mean, we're so used to the Gothic crutches, right? Like the garlic, the crosses, sleeping in dirt. But Risika explicitly mocks those tropes.
She really does.
Like, she sleeps in a bed with blackout curtains because she's nocturnal, not a corpse. And sunlight doesn't burst her into flames, it just triggers this intense, blinding migraine. It's framed as a severe physiological sensitivity rather than some mystical curse.
Taking away those traditional supernatural weaknesses is just a brilliant world-building choice, honestly, because it removes all the easy outs for the humans.
Right.
Holy water and crosses have literally zero effect. I mean, Risika casually mentions attending Christian church services post-transformation, which is such a fascinating detail.
Yeah, she just sits right there in the pews.
Exactly. It highlights that she isn't this otherworldly demon repelled by faith. She is an apex predator bound only by the laws of nature. The thesis of this whole world is aggressively Darwinian, like, be strong or be killed.
And even the detail about silver. It doesn't burn her upon contact. She actually wears a silver ring set with a garnet, which shows how much the lore pivots away from magic and leans into a sort of, I don't know, mutated biology.
Although there is that one lingering supernatural element regarding their reflections.
Oh, yeah, right.
The text notes Risika's reflection is hazy, like mist on the glass, and older vampires in her bloodline cast no reflection at all.
See, I read that less as a magical rule and more as a metaphor for detachment. Like, the longer they exist disconnected from humanity, the less the physical world even registers their presence. They're literally fading from the human plane.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
And that detachment is totally mirrored in how they travel and fight. The shape-shifting, for instance, like Risika favoring a golden hawk for travel and later on a Bengal tiger for combat.
And the ether travel.
Yes, the ether travel. The idea that they can transform into pure energy for instantaneous teleportation.
Well, if we look at the physics of that ether travel, it kind of implies vampires in this universe operate on a frequency different from standard matter, which perfectly explains the nature of their combat.
Right, because physical fangs are totally secondary.
Exactly. The older, stronger immortals in this bloodline, they fight entirely with their minds, launching what the text calls auras.
The aura combat is terrifying to me. It's like high-stakes psychic chess.
That's exactly what it is.
They aren't throwing magical fireballs at each other. They're literally invading each other's consciousness to forcefully shut down the opponent's motor functions.
It's brutal.
I mean, ask yourself, isn't the idea of someone bypassing your physical defenses to paralyze you from inside your own brain? infinitely more disturbing than just getting bitten in an alley?
Oh, without a doubt. It strips away your autonomy entirely. It represents the absolute ultimate violation of will, and that psychic dominance dictates their entire hierarchy. The strongest mind rules. But, the ecosystem isn't entirely tipped in the vampire's favor, which brings an interesting counterbalance to their dominance.
Right, because the humans have an invisible defense mechanism built into their population. The Triste witches.
Yes, the Triste witches.
I love the ecological trap the author built here. You have these immortal beings who bleed like humans. Their auras feel human. They eat, they breathe, but their blood acts like highly concentrated arsenic to a vampire.
It totally flips the food chain.
It's like Batesian mimicry in biology, but weaponized.
Mm-hmm.
It introduces this constant undercurrent of paranoia to the hunt. A vampire never truly knows that the vulnerable human they are stalking is actually a lethal dose of poison disguised as prey.
And that paranoia forces a certain isolation on them. They can never truly lower their guard, even among the seemingly defenseless.
Yeah, that's so true.
And that isolation is beautifully encapsulated in that early scene at the Concord coffee shop.
Yeah.
Like, Risika isn't even hunting there. She's just sitting there with a cup of coffee she doesn't even want, just watching the humans.
Right. Alexis, the barista, the tired school principal, the people arguing over the newspaper.
Exactly. She watches them from this staggering 300-year vantage point.
She notes how their complaints seem so agonizingly trivial to her. Boredom, being overworked, bad weather. Yet she calls them innocent, and she clearly harbors this deep, aching jealousy for that innocence.
Yeah, because she realizes that despite their fleeting dramas, they don't have to carry the weight of eternity.
Right, or the psychological burden of being a killer. It's this quiet, heavy moment of profound alienation.
She is basically an observer in an aquarium, mimicking the fish, but fundamentally severed from their reality.
But that intense isolation in the modern day doesn't really land until you realize how violently she was ripped away from a community that was suffocatingly tight-knit.
Oh, absolutely.
Like the transition from the anonymity of a New York or modern Concord coffee shop to claustrophobia of puritanical Massachusetts in 1701 is jarring.
The 1701 setting is definitely not just historical window dressing. It is the psychological engine of the entire tragedy. I mean, in 1701, the Salem witch trials were a raw, bleeding memory. The fear of witchcraft and the devil wasn't metaphorical for these people.
Right, it's literal.
The concept of eternal damnation was treated as absolute, literal truth. And when you look at Rachel's family dynamic with her father, Peter, her younger half-sister, Lynette, and her twin brother, Alexander, they are just steeped in that terror.
And Alexander's drowning in it.
Yeah.
We know his development of supernatural powers like the telepathy, the telekinesis, the pyrokinesis that accidentally burns Lynette. That's the catalyst for the whole tragedy.
Yeah, he sets it in motion.
But the weight of that puritanical guilt on him is crushing. When he asks Rachel, "Am I damned?" It's an ontological crisis.
It really is.
In his worldview, there is no scientific misunderstanding or genetic mutation. He genuinely believes he's practicing witchcraft and is fundamentally corrupted by the devil.
And Alexander's internal conflict creates the perfect vulnerability for a predator to exploit. He is a boy of intense faith who is convinced he is a monster.
Yeah.
And into this fear-soaked environment walks Aubrey Carew. His entrance is just steeped in subtle threat. He wears crimson and black, which were colors that were expensive and brazenly bold for the era, signaling wealth, but also danger.
Aubrey's whole aesthetic is a performance of dominance. Like, he hands Rachel that single, long-stemmed black rose with thorns as sharp as viper's fangs.
Right.
When she takes it and the thorn draws a drop of blood, it's a massive red flag in the context of 1701 folklore. It plays directly into the mythos of signing the devil's book with your blood.
Symbolically, by accepting the dark gift and bleeding upon it, she is marked.
Yes, it's a twisted courtship ritual, not for romance, but for territorial claiming.
And Alexander senses that darkness immediately. His nascent powers allow him to feel the immense, suffocating weight of Aubrey's aura. He realizes his attempt to protect his family has drawn something far worse to their doorstep.
Which sets up that fateful confrontation in the yard the following night.
Oh, that scene is so bleak.
It really is. Alexander sneaks out, Rachel follows him, and they meet Aubrey alongside Aether. Aether is the epitome of the dark witch archetype, deathly pale, black silk dress, the silver snake bracelet with ruby eyes.
We know Aether's there for revenge because Alexander wounded her a few nights prior when she tried to feed on Lynette.
Right. But I always found Aether's logic fascinating, if Honestly, slightly pathetic.
How so?
Well, Aether talks a big game about predator and prey, right? Mocking human morality by pointing out that humans cage and slaughter animals without a second thought, so vampires should be free to feed on humans.
It's a cold, brutal justification of the food chain.
Yeah, but I read it as a desperate rationalization. If Aether is truly this supreme predator, why the elaborate theatrical revenge plot over a minor slight from a teenage boy?
That's a great point.
Right. Like, why does she need to play these mind games? Yeager later points out in the text that Aether's actually quite weak for her age. She creates fledglings who she knows will be stronger than her, like Risika eventually becomes, specifically as a deterrent.
So other vampires hesitate to attack Aether because they fear her powerful children.
Exactly. So Aether's cruelty to Alexander isn't born of supreme confidence at all. It's born of a fragile ego. She was humiliated by a human boy, and she has to destroy Rachel just to prove to herself that she still sits at the top of the hierarchy.
Wow, yeah. Aether's insecurity being the inciting incident for Rachel's 3 centuries of trauma adds such a layer of bitter irony to the story.
It really does.
Aether doesn't just physically overpower Rachel. She weaponizes Rachel's deeply ingrained puritanical dread. When Aether forces her blood upon Rachel, punishing Alexander's protectiveness, she isn't just killing a girl.
No, it's so much worse.
As Aether forces her fangs into Rachel's throat, Rachel fights fiercely because she believes she is fighting for her immortal soul. She refuses to willingly drink Aether's blood in the darkness because she genuinely believes doing so will permanently damn her to hell.
And the transition from that human death to her immortal awakening is just visceral horror. Rachel wakes up in a completely windowless room, entirely made of mirrors.
Fractured reflections.
Right, the fractured reflections, her hazy image, Aether's even fainter reflection. It's a visual representation of her fading humanity. And then she realizes she has no heartbeat.
That moment must be so terrifying.
She tries to take a breath, and her unused lungs burn with this sharp, piercing pain. She is dead, yet terrifyingly conscious. And the most pressing issue isn't even the existential dread, it's the thirst.
Yeah, the text describes the thirst as liquid fire in the veins, like a burning dust. Aether explains that she must hunt, or the vampiric blood will slowly kill her in agony.
This is the beginning of the psychological breaking process.
Because Aether doesn't provide a blood bag or an easy transition, she teleports Risika to mayhem.
Which the concept of mayhem is fascinating.
It really is.
It's an invisible town owned by vampires operating parallel to the human world. It operates almost like a psychic blind spot placed over a physical location, rendering it unperceivable to normal human senses.
Right. And Aether drops Risika into a literal dungeon cell inside this hidden city, occupied by 2 human women awaiting execution for witchcraft.
Aether's setup is flawlessly cruel.
It is. She tells Risika these women are doomed by human authorities anyway, so feeding on them shouldn't burden her conscience.
It's a forced lesson in moral relativism.
Exactly. Aether casually feeds on one woman, while Risika is overwhelmed by the biological imperative, just the burning driving her mad. She finally turns to the other woman, who is terrified and babbling the Lord's Prayer, and she bites her.
And this is the exact moment Rachel truly dies. Because as she drains the woman, her newly activated vampiric telepathy forces her to read the victim's mind.
She sees flashes of memories.
Right. A laughing child, a wedding, morning church services. Risika realizes with absolute horrifying certainty that this woman is completely innocent.
Yeah.
She is a pious mother falsely accused by her neighbors. It's like a computer virus overwriting your ethical base code. You can see the firewall throwing up massive errors like the religious horror, the intense guilt, but the biological executable file runs anyway.
The blood cools the fire in her veins.
Yes, and she physically cannot stop drinking until the innocent woman's heart stops.
I mean, the cognitive dissonance in that moment is just staggering. It is the violent collision between her rigid, puritanical morality and her new, undeniable biology.
And Aether uses that exact moment of devastation to hammer home her thesis.
Right, she says, survive and be strong, or die, cornered by your prey, trembling because the night is dark.
Yeah. Aether forces Risika across the moral event horizon, basically proving that her human morality is not just obsolete, but a fatal liability.
And you know, the architect of that specific trauma is inextricably tied to Aubrey.
Oh, complete.
He was standing right there in the yard when Aether bit her, holding the silver knife that seemingly killed Alexander.
Right.
So Aubrey becomes the living embodiment of her trauma, setting off a toxic 300-year Cold War between them.
And that conflict is deeply ideological. Like, Aubrey makes it his mission to strip away whatever lingering humanity Risika clings to. We see the blueprint for his psychological warfare 3 years later, in 1704.
Yeah, when she goes back to Concord.
Exactly. Risika is surviving on the fringes, trying to hold on to her morality by only feeding on thieves and murderers. She returns to her childhood home just to observe her grieving father, Peter, from the shadows.
And she sees Peter has remarried a woman named Catherine.
And of course, Aubrey appears to pour salt in the wound. He taunts Risika, pointing out she's being replaced, trying to incite jealousy and suggesting she just kill Catherine.
Right, just to provoke her.
But when Risika refuses, Aubrey decides to escalate just to punish her compassion. He drops his invisibility to terrify Catherine and prepares to feed on her right in front of Peter.
So Risika snaps and attacks him. But, she is young and fighting with human limitations still.
Yeah.
Aubrey easily overpowers her. He pins her down and uses his magic silver blade, which he claimed from a defeated vampire hunter, to carve a deep, permanent scar from her throat down to her shoulder.
It's a permanent physical brand of his dominance.
It is.
That scar is the physical manifestation of her powerlessness. It's a reminder that in this universe, morality does not equate to strength. Aubrey wins because he isn't burdened by moral reservations.
And fast forward 3 centuries, and that dynamic still dictates their interactions.
Yeah, it absolutely does.
Risika deliberately leaves her quiet life in Massachusetts to hunt in Aubrey's territory in New York City.
Which is such a wild move.
It is. She goes to the Café Sangre, confronts his human servant Ryan, disarms him, reads his mind to confirm his allegiance, and then just kills him, leaving the body as a message.
It's a calculated, reckless act of defiance.
Yeah.
But Aubrey's retaliation is a masterclass in psychological warfare. Because he doesn't attack her physically. He leaves a single black rose on her bed in Concord, the exact same symbol from 1701, with a white card reading, "Stay in your place, Risika."
Aubrey's aesthetic warfare is so precise. The stylized tattoos of Norse and Greek monsters like Fenris and Echidna, the black roses.
Yeah, but his most devastating tactic, what I'd call the vulnerability tax, happens next.
The vulnerability tax, I like that.
He makes caring about anything too expensive for Risika to afford. While she is in her house, Aubrey projects his voice directly into her mind, quoting a single line from William Blake's poem, "Tiger, Tiger, Burning Bright."
And Risika immediately understands the threat.
Instantly.
She shapeshifts into a hawk and flies in a panic to the local zoo. She has a deep telepathic connection with a Bengal tiger there named Tora, which is the only creature she allows herself to purely love.
Yeah.
But she arrives to find the cage broken. Tora is lying dead, paws bound with rope, a knife driven through her heart.
It's pure sadism. By binding the tiger before killing it, he ensures the animal dies completely helpless.
Because Aubrey understands that in their society, the strongest immortals survive by distancing themselves from love.
Right, there's a massive liability.
He knows a direct physical confrontation with Risika carries a slight risk, so instead, he targets her capacity to love. He punishes her for maintaining a heart.
But I do want to throw out a theory here, though.
Okay, let's hear it.
Looking at this 300-year dance they do, I mean, Risika hates Aubrey, but she deliberately provokes him. She travels to his city to kill his servant. Are they actually enemies, or are they trapped in a deeply toxic codependency?
Oh, that's interesting.
Like, does Risika secretly need Aubrey to give her immortal existence friction? Without him, she's just a ghost watching humans drink coffee. Aubrey's cruelty gives her a focal point, a reason to sharpen her skills and stay engaged with eternity.
I mean, hatred is an incredibly potent anchor.
Right.
For 3 centuries, she has defined herself in opposition to him. He is the tangible villain she can fight, distracting her from the internal horror of her own monstrous nature.
Yeah, exactly.
But Aubrey miscalculates with the tiger. The murder of Tora doesn't reinforce the cycle of fear, it completely shatters it. It strips away the last of Risika's caution, propelling the narrative into the climax at Las Noches.
She has absolutely nothing left to lose.
Nothing.
Before leaving for New Mayhem, she traces the Perthro rune in the air, which is the symbol of a high-stakes gamble for those willing to bet everything.
And the aesthetic of the club, Las Noches, is incredible.
Oh, it's so cinematic.
It really is. It's an arena designed for sensory overload. Mist covering the floor, black mushroom-shaped tables, a pulsing red strobe light washing everything in blood-red hues, and walls made entirely of fractured mirrors with eyes painted beneath the glass.
It's the perfect stage for a battle between 2 psychic apex predators.
Yeah. Aubrey is lounging with a human girl, completely secure in his dominance. Risika approaches fearlessly, sitting on his table. They trade verbal barbs, but the real violence is happening underneath the dialogue.
Right, their auras are lashing out, battering each other's mental shields.
Aubrey pulls his silver knife, and Risika uses her telekinesis to fracture every single mirror in the club simultaneously.
The sheer display of power is breathtaking. She snaps his wrist, but Aubrey's mind is older, slightly stronger.
Yeah, he pushes back, and his psychic power is literally burning her veins and misting her vision.
He retrieves the knife and pins her to the ground, perfectly recreating their fight from 1704. He thinks history is repeating itself. He thinks he's reading her every move.
But Risika has evolved. In 1704, she fought with the limitations and predictable fear of a human.
Right.
Pinned to the floor of Las Noches, she bypasses the psychic chess match entirely. She relies on the ultimate predator adaptation. She shapeshifts into the Bengal tiger.
This is such a brilliant mechanical shift in the magic system. It's exactly like unplugging the Player 2 controller in a video game.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
Aubrey's entire combat strategy relies on reading his opponent's thoughts and predicting their next move. But a tiger doesn't use the same cognitive operating system.
No, not at all.
There is no complex thought process, no internal monologue of fear or strategy for Aubrey to intercept. The tiger form relies purely on raw, unpredictable animal instinct. She just reacts.
And symbolically, it's profound. She literally weaponizes her grief.
Yes.
She takes the symbol of the trauma Aubrey just inflicted, the murdered tiger, and uses it to overpower him. The sheer physical mass and instinctual fury of the tiger break his hold.
She slashes his chest and pins him down.
Suddenly, the great, untouchable Aubrey is trapped beneath a beast he cannot read or control. For the first time in centuries, he feels genuine terror.
And he begs. The ancient sadistic Aubrey actually begs for his life. He offers her his incredibly potent blood in exchange for survival.
And Risika accepts.
She shifts back to human form and drinks from him. The text describes his ancient blood tasting like thick white wine, flooding her with immense power and allowing her to read his mind completely.
But the coup de grace isn't killing him.
Oh, it's so much better.
She picks up his own magic silver knife, and she carves the exact same throat-to-shoulder scar into his flesh that he gave her 3 centuries ago.
That decision is far more devastating than murder. By drinking his blood, she absorbs his power. By carving the scar, she violently humbles his pride.
For a creature whose entire existence is predicated on untouchable dominance, this is a fate worse than death.
Absolutely.
She completely dismantles his psychological empire. He is forced to walk away humiliated, weakened, and permanently marked by his former victim.
It's a massive triumph. She has finally conquered the architect of her trauma. But, Atwater-Rhodes doesn't let the reader off the hook with a simple, triumphant freeze frame.
No, she certainly doesn't.
Immediately after the fight, while Risika is still giddy on Aubrey's blood, her hair literally striped with tiger gold, the narrative aggressively subverts the expected resolution.
She turns around and faces the literal ghost of her human past.
The emotional climax arrives without warning.
Throughout the text, Risika had been receiving mysterious notes, like a white card, a tear-stained note addressed to Rachel.
Right.
At the back of the shattered club, she finally senses the aura of the sender. It's Alexander, her twin brother. He survived 1701.
And not only did he survive, but he was saved and trained by the very Triste witch he had fought to protect his sister from.
Yeah, the irony is thick.
He learned to master his telekinesis and telepathy, and he is now a centuries-old, immortal Triste witch himself.
But the reunion is entirely devoid of warmth. Alexander looks at the carnage. He sees her tiger-striped hair, the shattered mirrors, Aubrey's blood dripping from her chin and hands.
And he is repulsed.
He looks at her with the exact same profound, puritanical judgment he carried 300 years ago. He asks her, "How could you do that? I never thought I'd see you with blood on you, willing to kill another. You walk with them as if you were one of them."
I have to pause here because Alexander's reaction infuriates me.
Oh, it's so frustrating.
The hypocrisy is staggering. He gets to wield magic. He gets to live forever as a powerful immortal, mentored by someone who nurtured his gifts.
Right.
But he looks at his twin sister, who was violently tortured, stripped of her humanity against her will, thrown into a dungeon and forced across a moral event horizon just to survive, and who's just won a 300-year war against a sadistic abuser, and he expects her to be a pacifist.
It's absurd.
Did he genuinely expect her to keep her mind hermetically sealed as an innocent 17-year-old girl while she lived among wolves for 3 centuries?
It highlights a really tragic irony. Alexander's core motivation in 1701 was protecting his sister's soul, yet his violent intervention inadvertently triggered her damnation. Now, 3 centuries later, he rejects her for adapting to the very nightmare his actions helped set in motion. He still views the world through the rigid, uncompromising lens of 1701 Massachusetts. He cannot comprehend the moral gray areas required for survival.
And Risika's reaction to his judgment is chilling, but also incredibly empowering.
Yeah, she was obviously hurt, but she doesn't crumble.
No. She realizes that the brother she has been mourning is clinging to an illusion of a girl who no longer exists. She looks at him coldly and states, "Rachel is dead. I am one of them."
That single line is her declaration of independence.
It really is.
She is rejecting Alexander's judgment and fully accepting her own complex nature. She acknowledges her predator instincts without apologizing for surviving.
Right.
She could have killed Aubrey, but chose to spare him, retaining a sliver of her human morality.
Right.
She isn't just a monster, and she isn't just an innocent victim. She is a synthesis of Rachel and Risika.
Which brings this entire narrative into focus for you, the listener.
Mm.
We aren't 300-year-old immortals fighting psychic battles in mist-filled nightclubs.
Hopefully not.
All right, hopefully not. But the story of Rachel and Risika is fundamentally about how we reconcile the innocent, naive people we used to be with the hardened, sharp-edged people we have to become to survive the trauma and trials of our own lives.
The environments we navigate change us. We build defensive walls, we learn the rules of toxic ecosystems, we adapt. Risika's ultimate victory wasn't physically besting Aubrey.
No.
Her true victory was refusing to let the ghost of her past, embodied by Alexander, shame her for the necessary adaptations she made to survive her present.
Which leaves us with a lingering thought to carry forward. In the original publisher's review of the book, they highlighted a specific observation Risika makes while looking at the caged tiger. She says, humans even cage themselves, though their bars are made of society, not of steel.
It's a powerful line.
So looking at her 3-century journey from a terrified, guilt-ridden girl to an unapologetic survivor, ask yourself, what parts of your own nature, your own strength are you currently keeping in a cage just to appease the people who knew the older, softer version of you?
Yeah.
And what would happen if you stopped apologizing for your survival and finally let the tiger out?